Alright, my name is John, also known as Bulletproof Cyrus, and I am the current spokesman and officer of the G.O.C Revolutionary Activist Committee. I will first give some background information on myself. Through my 20s and 30s, I have worked many jobs: construction, driving trucks, gravel pits. I was an emergency medical technician for a few years, and now my wife and I run a landscaping company. In 2006, I bought a computer and began to take part in the information exchange. I considered this my participation in a public service announcement and doing what I could do to get involved and practice my right to freedom of speech and freedom of press. It was my interest, and I appreciated what individuals like William Cooper and Phil Schneider had done, and what people like Jordan Maxwell and Alex Jones continue to do. Based on what has happened, and what should be obvious to you, is that I have committed myself to the disclosure of this information. We ask for no money because we feel the truth should be made available for free for everyone. I do this because I consider it necessary and my duty as a human being. I understand that what I am saying reflects upon my name and how I will be seen for eternity. My course of action will also reflect upon my children's name and my grandchildren's name, and I stand by my word. I do this willingly and with hope of shedding light upon a reality that has been withheld from the people, and we, the GOC, do this with a complete and even conscience that what we are doing is for the freedom, hope, and benevolent direction of humanity, to unlock her greatest potential. Furthermore, if some group or party were to fail to do this, we would be in grave danger, not only as the American nation, but also as a human civilization. The date was approximately fall of 2007. At the time, I was working full-time and spending most of my free time writing a book that had nothing to do with the type of information I provide on the internet. Then the beings appeared one night. It was the most shocking scene I had ever witnessed, and instantly I sat up in bed, wide awake, and looked at them. There was a tall orange drac and 4 synthetic human greys. They were solid. They were making a terrible sound which filled the entire room. They provided their own source of light which illuminated the room. They appeared to glow, but underneath the glow I saw the drac's greasy skin, and it was glaring at me with the most evil eyes I had ever seen. It had what looked like a crest on its head, and later what I found out to be horns. The blue-skinned greys were also solid beings who appeared to be drained of life. They were gaunt and sort of hung there as though they were leaning forward. Their necks were bent, and their limbs jutted forward and out, hanging limply in a weakened state of posture. If they were wearing suits, it was the same color as their skin, and so they appeared completely blue. After I sat up, they stayed there for about 5 seconds, all the while making this terrible sound which filled the room. At that point, a white light was then upon them, and they disappeared as they quickly beamed away. I originally thought that they had created this light, and it was part of their transport technology. Yet now I believe that they may have retreated and dematerialized. It looked as if they were shrinking into a disappearing beam of light. These beings left a lingering odor, so I will go into further detail about that. Each of these creatures have their own scent. Since they are completely separate from the human race and our human society, you will notice their smell distinctly if you come in contact with them. Such as a dog smells like a dog, respectfully, and a cat smells like a cat, the greys have their own particular odor, and so do the dracs and the buffath. These were all new smells to me, but they are comparable to other things. However, I do not want to go on record as stating something that will be considered insensitive to these nations. Nonetheless, the synthetic greys smell of something similar to a sharp cheese or a decomposing matter. I have learned that this is due to the clones' diet. They consume minerals only, and they produce this smell. They do not live for too long, not more than a month, but they constantly reproduce themselves in test tubes and share a collective consciousness. However, they are having problems with their genetics. I could go into more detail about this later, concerning some hybridization between the different alien types. The Draco smell more like the buffath. I know this because the two species are genetically compatible, and the Draco are responsible for the buffath's evolutionary jump. Having been experimented on and guided by the Draco, who the buffath look up to as technological sponsors. Supposedly the Draco merged some of its genetics with the large cave-dwelling and primitive humanoids who may not be warm-blooded. and subsequently technologically guided their civilization. The Draco inhabiting many star systems of the Draco constellation, including Thuban, also known as Alpha Draconis. The Buffath also have a very distinct musty smell like damp cedar chips, and I've also heard a description being, in quotes, they smell like the reptile house at the zoo, and this is also accurate. The night I had the experience of meeting the Drac and the Greys, they stood facing me, making an awful noise, apparently through the use of an unknown technology, which sounded similar to this recreated sound clip. Even though they surprised me, appearing and sounding awful, I did not judge them on their appearance. I remained calm, and my one and only thought was a very clear, "What do you want?" At that point, the light entered the room, and the beings dematerialized. I drew a picture of what I had seen, and much later included the drawing and a video, and that was that. A few years went by. My wife and I are proud to announce the birth of our 2 daughters, and I continued on with school, and we kept busy at work, and I spent my free time writing my novel, and I followed along with the truthers. I did a few more videos whenever I had the time, and then in the spring of 2010, the government moved in, or better described as a secret military project that I've since found out was overseen by a Senate briefing council committee. So they made it clear that my computer was hacked, and they had me surrounded, and at that point they began testing top secret technology. If I had to guess, I'd say this group had been given technology by the Greys, and so they'd been working with the Greys in that regard. And the government also wanted to check the authenticity of my ET report. After this secret agency moved in, it all happened rather quickly, but if I were to give it an everyday meaning, it was like if the technological inquisition moved in and set up shop. And not only did they want me to stop the information I was providing to others, but they wanted further information about the extraterrestrial contact that I reported, and they wanted that information exclusively. It seems that others have been recruited through this same manner of hostile negotiation. They went about methods of forcible recruitment, and I became an unwilling test subject at times, and I witnessed many others involved in these games of top secret technological research and development. But I was on surveillance, and so they had access to everything, that they could hear everything and they could read everything. So that I said and wrote, so I continued to record data, and this data was removed at times. So I didn't have access to all reported data at all times. I did not like living like this, and I'm not trying to normalize this. This is simply what happened, and so this is what I'm reporting. Whether you like it or not, this is what happened. Over time, the rate and the hostility of the attacks continued, and I feared for my family's life. And over a course of about 3 or 4 months, a great deal of events took place that I'm trying my best to report now. Having survived this, I have learned a great deal about the technology the secret government has and can wield against the public. Now it seems as though they had agreed in the councils to allow the release of this information, and have elected me to finish what I began, but this is completely off record. There's a news blackout concerning this story. Not everyone will have access to this information, but for once the public will decide for themselves who is on a need-to-know basis, but more importantly, they will have to decide who needs to act. Alright, so over time, these councils, which I'll call them, have learned a great deal, which is the reason I feel that I'm being able to do what I'm doing now. Some of these maneuvers by the U.S. secret government was to establish what I had seen was real for their classified informational records. I am absolutely sure that they also believed that I knew too much at times concerning the direction they were going in, and they seemed intent on following that destructive and fastest path. So they tried to confuse things and eventually shut me up, including trying to cause accidents to occur, whereupon they would continue with their original plan. While going through this, it seems as though they were trying to convince me that either they or a military group similar to them had caused an image of those extraterrestrial beings to appear in my room that night many years before, and I'd been confused into believing that they were real. So I saw the hologram technology that the government possessed, but this is nothing similar to the real beings that I saw that night. The government does have some interesting hologram technology. You've probably all seen the hologram suit on the internet. Well, in the United States Secret Army, they camouflage their soldiers and their weapons with this hologram technology, so you cannot see them and they can move about stealthily. The invisible men and women of Black Ops, I call them. They also have projectable holograms. One that I witnessed in June of 2010 looks like the Academy Award winner statue man, and it supposedly represents a gold glowing alien, and they could project this type of hologram into the middle of a street or the middle of a field. It doesn't come in that clear, yet it looks like a tall gold man, and it kind of sparkles. It also appears to shuffle in place, but I don't scare too easily, and when I walked toward it, it faded away. So concerning the information about Project Bluebeam and how the government can fool people into thinking they are seeing aliens or a UFO invasion through the use of holograms, well, I could tell the difference between something real and something that is a hologram, and so can a lot of other people. So the idea of staging an alien invasion with holograms is sort of silly if they think they could go anywhere with that. I know the difference between the two, and I assure you I am not confusing the two. So at this point, I think that there are a lot of questions concerning these different alien types that I'm reporting, and I could go into detail about some of them. Usually, if you saw these malevolent ET types, which I described, it would mean that you were in trouble. They are known for abducting people and forcibly implanting them. The implantee usually has little to no memory of the experience. Obviously, there are humans who have engaged with these alien types through the centuries and millennia of human development on Earth. However, groups of humans who have been known to work with these beings do not survive for very long, and if they do, they end up looking similar to the synthetic greys, for example. Yet in more recent times, in the last 2,000 years, from what I know, unless you had a family or an organizational history of secretly dealing with these beings, regarding them in a spiritual or religious sense, looking up to them as your God or your leader or something. Besides that, most people on Earth would never run into them or even know about their existence, and this is a good thing. The secret groups that ritually meet with these beings in person are extremely rare and have to travel long distances deep underground to do so. However, if you were of the slightest minority who by chance were approached by them topside, it was not a good thing. Normally, our different societies do not mix. Just as most animal species keep separate in natures, you won't see the tigers hanging out with the rhinos and the rhinos hanging out with the alligators. So for the most part, our species have evolved and existed apart. Hopefully over time you'll start to realize why they are regarded as alien and why we've enjoyed the comforts of a human society, controlled for the most part by humans, and how this is slowly changing unless steps are taken. But before I get too far ahead of myself, let's clarify some issues. There are many rumors concerning these aliens. It seems that people would like to assign them human roles so they could somehow identify with them better, I guess. They envision them as blood-drinking vampires who live in castles and rule our society from above. But no, they don't take part in day-to-day activities concerning the regulation of our society. If they do get involved, it's big power moves involving war and slavery, where they manipulate things by using their human puppets who they psychologically control. People have always been confused by the Greys, and they have used their technology to further confuse things, and so there are also rumors that these beings are rich and powerful people who are really shape-shifting reptiles who live among us. This is not true. There is no creature with material bodies such as us who could shapeshift. A shapeshifter refers to a demon possession, and this is a whole nother subject. Throughout history, the Greys have broken the rules of intervention and have approached some people, hence the many reports. The best quote I've heard to describe this is that the malevolent aliens have manipulated people through our religions and our secret societies. Throughout history, the Greys have broken the rules of intervention and have approached some people, hence the many reports. The best quote I've heard to describe this is that the malevolent aliens have manipulated people through our religions and secret societies. For instance, the Greys might show up if some rich cult is intent on meeting the devil or some. So the Greys have manipulated people through the use of their technology, and they appear magical or godlike. So it's no surprise that their human minions follow in their footsteps. If a person or group is inclined to hate and do wrong unto his fellow man, they begin to embark on a ritual or a course in that direction, and will often be successful if it is advantageous to the Bufath to control such endeavors. This is very reminiscent of, again, the timeless quote of an evil person selling their soul to the devil for material power or gain. It happens whether you regard it in a religious or scientific sense. It's malevolent humanity who have chosen to play a negative role in human development and have invited them into our house time and time again. Some of you think I am racist against the Bufath, yet the truth is that the Bufath are intent on controlling humanity and have historically done so through the use of mind control and a complete disregard for human rights. And human traders have gone along with this and going so far as to worship these beings in secret. There are secret religious cults devoted to the knowledge of these beings. Brotherhood of the Snake is one that I've heard mentioned. The United States government has a different relationship with them due to the technological exchange that is taking place between our government and the synthetic humans. The military now experiment with a less advanced form of their technology, while large religious institutions have systematically covered up knowledge concerning these beings, turning them into mythological creatures or religious. The Greys, in fact, live deep underground. If you think driving cross countries a long way or flying from America to Europe, then envision the Earth in its three-dimensional form and how much space it allows for the honeycombed and waterways of cavernous inner Earth. The inner Earth is their ecosystem. It's which they have evolved in and consider much more valuable than our homes on the surface of the planet. They view us as land creatures who occupy less valuable real estate on the surface of the planet. After all, we are subject to whatever happens on the surface, while they stay protected from radiation, from storms, weather, asteroids. There's a deep underground base controlled by the Greys under the G.O.C Plateau, for example. Historically, they've enjoyed the association with the religious and the spiritual. Throughout the ages, they have used their technology to act or appear as devils, gods, poltergeists, demons, jinn. So based on the fact that they reside deep underground, and many of us don't even venture out of our own neighborhoods, nevertheless go cave exploring, so in everyday life, in day-to-day America, most people just don't run into the synthetic Greys or the Bufath race. But people have, and continue to report it, and then the majority wonders whether or not to believe them until they personally see them. And the Greys prefer it that way. They are content enjoying the status that you have given them as God or Anunnaki or the devil, and you've heard about the devil's greatest trick. It convinced the world it did not exist. So the truth is that they are happy as long as you are kept ignorant, and you remain ignorant to them, and more especially their mind-controlled minions as they work to dominate and manipulate. The Brotherhood of the Snake is a gang within a secret society within a religious order. Over the centuries, there have been different cults or groups that have been controlled by the Greys, and this Brotherhood of the Snake is a current, long-standing one that is of concern. Our own military has been given technology by the short Greys or the synthetic humans. Members of the Brotherhood of the Snake have proven themselves worthy, and for the most part killing and murdering humanity without care or concern. They are wealthy or hold positions as valuable assets to militaries, corporate firms, or religious institutions. They have gone through a ritual called the Snake Brother Ritual. I'll have to go into more detail about that later. If the initiate rises up within that group, and there are probably no more than a dozen people worldwide, they get brought down into a cavernous meeting location underneath one of these landmarks, for instance, under the Giza necropolis. and they descend far enough by human means and then meet up with a transport provided by the Bufath, and they take part in a joint Bufath human ritual. It appears that members of the Brotherhood present themselves in the flesh and do not face the Bufath directly. This gang of Earth humans seems very nervous upon seeing the strangers because most Earth humans are small compared to the Bufath. Three figures who are high-level priests stand on stage between the groups wearing robes and masks. But besides rituals like this, the races stay separate from our culture. These rituals where they appear as direct as that is very rare, I'm told. At other times, the Bufath employ a sophisticated technology which allows them to dematerialize, and when materialized, they cloak themselves with a hologram much more advanced but comparable to what the United States military has. So you can imagine the hologram technology possessed by the alien in the Predator movie to get a visual idea of what I'm talking about. However, they could transport and dematerialize at will. They could also control most minds, aided with mind control technology, in a matter of moments. While other minds are tougher, they are soon finding out. These beings do exist, there are skulls to prove it, and the government experiments with some of the technology that they have been provided with. This is very unfortunate because much of that technology is centered around mind control, which I will describe in the next communication. Alright, I have already described low-frequency sound wave weapons, and the weapons the military possess are a less sophisticated mind control weapon technology than what the gray extraterrestrial uses, of course. The gray extraterrestrials are invading our culture. When these types of weapons are deployed, there is a subtle vibration, but the results are extreme. This affects the target's mood and disorientates the victim. They have trouble with everyday tasks and are prone to confused acts associated with hysteria. Many people have gone crazy. Some have done terrible things, but this is another sad subject. Most people cannot maintain control. However, if the target attempts to cope with these terrible sensations to further make things difficult while the target is enduring the elf waves, the agency could begin to tamper with the victim's electrical equipment, and this creates more hysteria. They turn TVs and stereos on and off. They eject CDs and open their garage door. These weapons that they use with mind control are also used in sync with implant devices. I am not sure what frequency or bandwidth they are using to transmit their communications, but I would describe it as follows. Now, forever who is listening to this, for you to be able to fully understand, I need you to close your eyes, then place your fingers lightly over your eyelids and press down slightly. If you gently press on your eyelids, some of you will experience a few bursts of color. Some people call this light. It is also said to be like neurons firing off in random electrical signals in the brain. If you notice the interesting kaleidoscopes of color bursts that you could see, now if you remove your fingers and no longer press on the backs of your eyelids, you see the color fade into darkness, or do you still see some light? So some people do not need to press on their eyes to see the light. Some people could just close their eyes. Now, if you could imagine those bursts of colors being digitally arranged into basic shapes or patterns, this is what people will see with an implant. A simple shape or a moving picture can be broadcasted to them. That when they close their eyes, they see it. So you can imagine the possibilities on exchanging information. So it might sound good until I describe it with more detail. But at this point, it's important to know what I'm speaking about. And remember the color and texture of the light you see when you close your eyes and you press on your eyelids. What color spectrum would this be called in science? Some people do not need to press on the backs of their eyelids to see the so-called firing of synapses. And by being implanted, some people could be trained to view this color spectrum, and then the information could be transferred stealthily. So they are stating this is that this is an artificial psychic ability, or ESP, which it isn't. It's being stuck with a transistor and getting wired the information. The person closes their eyes and sees the neurons form this image, and they name it the image with 100% accuracy. It's not ESP. It's the beginning of turning people into robots. It's the beginning of technological slavery on a mass scale. The only thing is that as of before this communication, the only information that the public is being provided with or warned about concerning this implant is through this Mark of the Beast scenario. With the Mark of the Beast scenario, you are told in the Bible that no one will be able to buy or sell unless they have the mark on their right hand or on their head. And at the same time, you've been told it's a measure of being biometrically scanned, or they're convincing people that it's to stop missing persons, or convince people that instead of having to memorize all their bank and ID numbers and have to carry around a big heavy wallet, they could simply have that information surgically implanted in their head. Through people like Aaron Russo, we have learned that families like the Rockefellers think it's a great idea for everyone in the future to be implanted. And that's the plan by quote-unquote elites. I prefer to call them techno-trash or androids in training. And when these traitors, human scumbags, finally convince you that the act of using your wallet gets too complex, you could have the contents hardwired to your skull. Then at the supermarket counter, you could have your face scanned by the checkout girl instead of your credit card. That all sounds great on CBS News when they tell you it's great to chip your pets and then later you get your kids chipped. That way you could always track them via the global human traffic tracking network. But can any of you ponder how anything like that could be used against you? Can any of you think how that can get a little bit out of control if that direction is taken? They tell you in this Mark of the Beast scenario that the only thing you should worry about is having your implant turned off if you get in trouble. So then you cannot buy or sell without the implant. But the truth is a lot worse than that. Whenever it's deemed appropriate, maybe it's for the sake of science and they picked your name out of a hat, or maybe someone in the military was told to teach you a lesson because you were getting too radical in your thinking. But if you cause any trouble for the secret government, all they have to do is turn on your implant. And then your torture begins. They don't turn your implant off if you were considered bad. They turn it on. They turn it on, and then they crank up the volume, and they broadcast nonstop digital and radio signals. They turn you into a literal television head, a radio head. Then they basically act like they are a DJ. They broadcast noise, they broadcast simple messages like I explained, and then these so-called scientists or these psychopaths in the labs think it's great to make baby noises or speak gibberish or broadcast music, talking, whatever they want, nonstop, audio recordings, anything. Now the signal is received and processed by the target's brain, and their brain turns it into sound or sight or process that information. And with that constant flow of information, your brain is constantly kept at work for days, for weeks, for months. And that person cannot get proper rest. They cannot achieve deep sleep where they go into REM or rapid eye movement sleep. And over a course of days or weeks or months, that person wears down. They break down mentally. Without sleep, they break down physically. Meanwhile, they could assault the person with all types of horrific statements and noises and images that alienate all types of basic civil and human rights. Even the worst criminals in the world are imprisoned, but they are granted the freedom of peace in their own minds. But now any test subject, innocent people, innocent activists have had their minds invaded by a group of mad scientists who think this technology should be implanted into all human minds. and used to create like an artificial reality grid. Whether you want to live as a robot and choose to go in that direction, or you begin to realize that if you do not want your children and your grandchildren to grow up living like technological slaves with implants stuck in their heads, aiming for new and ever-increasing lows for humanity, you better do something. If you want to follow in the footsteps of your heroes, the synthetic grays, you keep on following your blueprint of merging all your power underneath this new world order cartel. This sort of implant technology seems to be controlled by some cold and shallow behaviorists who believe humanity is nothing but a series of natural instincts and learned behaviors like all animals of low intelligence. While some may regard humanity such as this, I hope others have realized what I have realized, that the time has come to expose this technology connected to these crimes against humanity and to work to eliminate these programs which have so far only been disguised as science. This science only leads to mass slavery and dehumanization of mankind. The technology now being used only serves to enslave our fellow men and women. We are allowing ourselves to be defeated from within. We are being fooled by these second-rate technologies and abandoning the path of true evolution and evolutionary technologies. Just to make sure that there is no mistake, having been implanted, any person will open themselves to the possibility of getting their minds violated and ravaged by an insane form of thought police whose aim is finding the breaking point of the target's will. They could also turn a person into a robot or an android with a radio TV head. They can also get away with murder by setting up that person to make an error in judgment, and they cause an accident. Anyone with an implant could eventually be murdered. They can make it look like as they've been acting unusual up until the point of death, but they've just been harassed by lunatics screaming into a mic that is broadcasted 24 hours a day into their heads. These broadcasts can also confuse the person so they cannot differentiate their own thoughts from the ravings and the commands of others on the other end of this implant. The goal of the people following the New World Order agenda is to get everyone chipped. That way everyone can be monitored at all times. They can monitor your thought waves, and if you get a little angry, that could be against the law, and they'll give you a little shock. You're a little angry over there. Okay, just send them a real shock. Give them a shock. We don't allow that sort of thoughts around here. Is this your vision for the future? You see any type of hope or freedom for humanity with everyone living like this? If you do, you got a pretty twisted way of looking at things. If anyone gets out of steps of the line, they get their implant cranked up until they go crazy, or they get involved in an accident, or they die. This is the path that your leaders are obliviously taking you on, and you need to act now. And you don't need me to tell you what to do. If you were standing in my presence right now and you asked me, what should you do? I would respond, what can you do? What should you do? And then I'll suggest you go do it. And I need you to do something different, which is think for yourselves. So if you take anything away from these communications, please think for yourself. This is what the G.O.C ultimately hopes for. Anyone who intends to debunk this information or act as apologists or attempt to normalize the urgency of said information should be considered a traitor and an enemy of mankind. Anyone who doesn't take this seriously is a jellyfish who has the life expectancy of a housefly and as much survival instincts as a dodo bird. Many activists have died and continue to risk their lives to bring you this information.